And basically I'm planning on doing these live streams every single week where I talk about a different topic with you guys. And this week I wanted to discuss the woman who saved millions of people in the province that I lived in back in China. I want to make this into a proper video, not just live. And what I want from you guys is maybe some advice or what you guys think about how it should be shot, how it should be edited and all of that, because I'm planning on just kind of making this a moto vlog. But that's a little bit too easy. I feel like maybe I could also do it in a way that's a little bit higher, like in a higher quality, that's better produced. And so if you guys could let me know in the comments, that'd be great with some of your suggestions, because I haven't quite figured out how I want to shoot it in my head just quite yet. But I do know more or less what I want to say, and so this live stream lets me kind of get my thoughts off my chest. Hello, one of you people who commented. I want to get my thoughts off in this live stream so that when I go to make the video, I know what parts to keep in, what parts to leave out, and all of that. So, it's a really cool temple behind me. But yeah, so 10 years ago, doesn't feel like 10 years ago, I can't believe I'm saying that, but 10 years ago I moved to Henan province in China. Now, Henan province is very, very, very populated. I'm not sure if this is still true, but when I lived there, it was the second most populated province in all of China. More than 100 million people, just an absurd amount of people. It was also a very, very poor province. When I had lived there, it had developed a little bit more, but throughout most of the 20th century and the early 2000s, it was a very poor province. Because a lot of Henan, which is in central China, the birthplace of China, because the Yellow River runs through it and all of that, is quite a rural place. Now, of course, there are some bigger cities. Zhengzhou, for example, the capital, the largest city, is quite big. I lived there for a few months. I actually really enjoyed it there. But for the most part, Henan was very rural. And it got hit really hard by the Cultural Revolution and the Great Leap Forward, because the government sent its citizens to the countryside to work in the farms and to focus on manufacturing and things like that. And this policy failed miserably. It was absolutely catastrophic. It was not good. I don't know how much I can say so early in the video without getting demonetized, but I'm sure you can imagine, or you can always watch other videos on the Cultural Revolution that are a lot better produced than anything I'll ever make, and you can learn about it there. But basically it was not good. And so Henan province was left incredibly poor. When I lived there, I used to take my motorcycle and drive out into the countryside. I used to think I lived in the countryside because I lived in a city called Kaifeng. And Kaifeng was not a big city. It was probably like a fourth tier city. By the way, I feel like I'm not Hunan, Henan. Okay, good. At least I know you guys can hear me. Sometimes it's difficult to tell. My microphone has the tendency to, no, it's not even a microphone, it's the phone jack. Isn't really working all that well, and so sometimes if I'm charging my phone or if I'm using a microphone like I am right now, it'll pop out and then you guys can't hear me. It's really annoying. So I'm trying not to touch my phone as much as possible. But anyways, I used to think that I lived in the countryside because the city I was living in was so small. But it turns out there was a lot more countryside than that, and I used to take my motorcycle and ride, and you could tell this place was not a rich province. This place, some of the villages I would drive into had, like, people were living in brick buildings that were not all that well put together. The roads were dirt, nothing was paved. I mean, it was rough. But it was nothing like how it was in the 90s or the 80s or the 70s or the 60s, or the further back you go, the poorer it gets. So anyways, in the 90s, around the mid-90s, people needed a way to make money like they always have. And the government had this program where, oh, there's a swimming pool over there. Nice. I don't know why I didn't know that. It's so close to where I live. People needed to make money, and the government started opening these blood clinics around the around Henan province and around actually all of China. And people found out that they could go and give their blood, sell their blood. And if you were a farmer in Henan at the time, you could make a whole month's salary just off giving blood, which was great. I mean, you grew up poor, you're in one of the poorest provinces in all of China, you've got no money. All you gotta do is give blood and get some money. I mean, it sounds like a really good idea. You're stimulating the economy, the country is receiving blood so you can save lives. It's a good thing. But it was so lucrative that black market clinics, I guess if you can call them that, gray market clinics started to open up and take people's blood and try and make some money off of it. And the problem was back then is that these clinics were not what you would call sterile or clean. Sorry, I want to make sure I can cross this road and not get hit by a car. So they were not clean. They were not cleaning needles, excuse me. They weren't sterilizing anything. It was like just bad news bears all around. You can understand how this could be a huge problem because they weren't testing people for diseases or viruses or whatever in the blood. Especially, you have to also remember, like I said earlier, that Henan was a very populated province, the second most populated province in the whole country. And so all these people were going and giving their blood, and all their blood goes into a central tank. They separate the plasma from the blood, and then that blood that they take goes to other people with the same blood type. But none of this is tested. It's all dirty. It's all unclean. And so you can imagine what happens next. Now, enter Dr. Gao Yaojie. I'm probably going to butcher her name, the tones on her name, but whatever. She was a doctor, like a gynecologist, and she sort of started specializing in HIV and AIDS. And she was living in, I think she was living in Henan at the time because she ended up studying at Henan University and then eventually teaching at Henan University, which is where I was a teacher too, actually. That's in Kaifeng. It's one of the oldest provinces in all of China, oldest universities in all of China, excuse me. And so she was a teacher there, and she got called into a hospital one day to sit in with this client because the doctors at this hospital were having the hardest time diagnosing this woman who was incredibly sick, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with them. And so she was called in to sit in to see if maybe she could offer up some advice. They ended up finding out that this woman, who was in her early 40s, was dying from AIDS. And it was very confusing to them. You have to remember, this is the mid-90s. They didn't really have a good understanding of how it worked, how it was transmitted. The whole world didn't, let alone China. And this poor woman who was dying was just distraught. I mean, she couldn't figure it out. She hadn't slept around or anything like that. She hadn't practiced unsafe sex or whatever. How could she get this virus from, how could she get it from blood transfusions, from like giving blood or receiving blood? It didn't really make sense at the time. This had a profound effect on Dr. Gao, who went on to help out the people of Henan province. She would go and around to the different rural communities and educate the locals on how it spread and what to do and treat people who were infected. And she used her own money to do all this. She wrote a book about it and distributed it to different people. And this was all good work. She was basically, the Mother Teresa of China, basically, helping out the people of this province. Any award she received, I think she got like $10,000 or $20,000 US reward for her work with HIV and AIDS, and she ended up using all of that money. She ended up using all of that money to print more books and give them away, and she became well known for just helping people out who were struggling with this horrible thing. Now you have to ask yourself when something like this happens, how? I mean, who's at fault here? And this is where we start to run into problems with Dr. Gao, because it's obvious to her that the fault lies with the government. And someone just commented, I can't imagine how many people were infected this way. And yeah, you can imagine it was a lot. I don't have the exact numbers or the exact figures right now. Again, this is a live stream. I don't have all of the facts and information with me right now, but when I make this into a proper video, I'll definitely have those numbers. But it was a lot. Lots of people were infected, lots of people died. You had people in the province who were known as, I hope this, by the way, I just realized I'm walking on a oddly quiet road. I didn't really know this was so close to my home. I hope it's not boring to watch. It's literally just an empty field. Sorry, I'm just exploring. I haven't been down here yet before, so I'm just walking around seeing what's what. Barbed wire fence. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't good. And so she started criticizing the government because these clinics are really unsafe. They're really unclean, and it was just unacceptable. And so she would voice criticisms towards the government, and not even like anything that bad. I remember when I was reading up on this, it's not like she was organizing protests or, you know, being all that much outspoken, but she definitely knew where the blame lied. And so she would get, you know, visits from the police to her apartment. She would get okay, quite mean, we can hear you. Okay, good. She would get, you know, visits from government officials and stuff. And she would receive awards in other countries for her work. And of course, if you're Chinese and you want to leave, you want to go travel abroad, this is particularly true of the 90s, you had to ask the government first before you could go. And they denied her, they wouldn't let her leave, and they placed her on house arrest. And this went on for a very long time. She was just under a lot of pressure from the government, nothing direct. I don't think she was actually arrested. She was just placed on house arrest, so she couldn't leave and she couldn't criticize the government. Because the whole time, by the way, the government is completely denying that AIDS even exists within China, which is just ridiculous. You know, you've got God knows how many people with these symptoms who are getting sick and dying, and the government has no answer. And meanwhile, this doctor is a whistleblower on the whole thing, and they're just keeping her under house arrest to keep it under wraps. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't everyone who was around in 2019 for that other virus that shall not be mentioned due to cockroach, due to demonetization and all of that. This will probably get demonetized anyway. But so yeah, so they were trying to cover the whole thing up, and she ends up, I think she was invited to speak at a university, or maybe she was going to get another award or something like that in the States. And so she ended up going there, and she ended up staying. She ended up living in New York and escaped China. I call it an escape. She escaped China in a very similar way to I did, which was by getting on a plane and fucking leaving. So it's not really, I wouldn't call it an escape. However, when you're under that much pressure, I suppose you could call it an escape. But yeah, this is very typical behavior by the Chinese government. If they're at fault for something, if they're about to lose face, or if they're about to lose trust from the public, there's a pretty good chance they're going to shut the whole damn thing down. And anyone who points fingers at them is going to be placed under house arrest, or just arrested, or straight up disappeared. And it doesn't matter who you are, by the way. It doesn't, like, if you're really rich or really famous, that doesn't mean that you're protected in any way. You are probably going to go away too. It happened to, what was his name, Jack Ma or something? Or no, I think that's the TSMC guy. I don't remember. The guy who owns like Tencent or whatever. I should know more about this, but I can't remember the exact details. That guy disappeared, off the face of the earth for like months. And he's one of the richest men in the whole world. Like, we're talking Jeff Bezos type money. You know, he's like the Jeff Bezos of China is what they called him. And he was just nowhere to be found for like months. He was just disappeared. He ended up resurfacing later, but the fact that can happen, was it Terry Guo? Yeah. The fact that can happen is just like so insane to me. Like, super rich, super well known. You'd figured he'd be taken care of. You'd figured he'd be like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, protected, like exempt, I think, from the government doing that type of thing. And it's like, no, they'll disappear that guy in 2 seconds without caring. So, yeah. So this lady was, I think, probably in the process of getting disappeared, but she ended up getting out. And the reason I'm making this video now is because just today, or I suppose it would be yesterday, depending on where you are in the world, she passed away. Probably of old age. She lived a long life. But I saw her story in the news, and I thought it was interesting because I remember living in Hunan and people telling me to be careful of HIV and AIDS, and because Hunan had this kind of stereotype of people just being infected with it because of what happened in the 90s. And I feel like I'm not doing a very good job at telling the story and giving a good idea of the scope and scale of exactly what happened. I've done a fair bit of reading on it, but I feel like without maybe the proper time to tell a story or write a bit of a script, it's difficult to maybe get that across to you guys on camera, but it was a really big deal. And you know, the effects of that whole thing are still present today. I think I got distracted when I was talking earlier about, I think they called them like, God, what was the word? It was basically a term for children whose parents both died from AIDS. And there are a lot of them in Hunan. And it's just like, if you talk to random people in Hunan, I remember my security guard. So like every this is very different to how we do it in the West, I'm pretty sure, most countries in the West. But, and the same in Taiwan as well, actually. Every single apartment has a security guard, a baoan, as they're known in China. They have a different word for them here in Taiwan, but they basically open the door for you and manage the building or whatever. Did you mean Jack Ma? I don't remember who I meant. Maybe it was Jack Ma, the guy who owns Tencent, WeChat, and all that. Or Alibaba, I think. I think he owned Alibaba. But anyways, I was talking to my security guard, and this poor guy, he was quite old. I remember I was asking him how to get to somewhere. I think I was going to a lake or something like that. And he was trying to tell me how to get there, but at the time, my Chinese wasn't good enough. I couldn't understand what he was saying. So I pulled out my maps, not Google Maps, because there is no Google Maps in China. I can't remember what app I was using. I might have been using Apple Maps, because Apple Maps still works in China. And I got out the Chinese keyboard and I asked him to type out the address so that I could just, put it into my maps, and then I'd be on my way. I could drive there no problem by myself. And he was like, I can't read, I can't write. Like, he was completely illiterate. That is the level of poverty that people grew up in Hunan. And his parents both passed away. He didn't tell me this. I think a girl I was dating or a friend of mine or something at the time, a Chinese person was talking to him. And it was around Chinese New Year, and he was wishing us Happy Chinese New Year and asked us what we were doing. And my friend said that she was going to go home and spend time with his family. And the security guard said that, his parents passed away a long time ago from this, what happened, from getting AIDS. In the 90s from blood transfusions. And so, like, this whole story, like, I remember hearing about it in Hunan in 2013. And what a rough place. I think it's probably the roughest place I had ever lived. Like, I lived in Kaifeng, teaching at Hunan University, and it was like, I remember when I signed the contract, they had promised me an apartment close to where I was going to work. And I was quite excited about having my own apartment in China. And of course I get there and it's not, God, that scooter's so loud. It's not an apartment, it's a frickin' hotel room that they want me to move into. And I was like, so for the whole year, I have to live in a hotel room? Like, that's just ridiculous. But I did it, and I ended up making it work. And it was very strange because, you know, it's a hotel room, so there's no like laundry machine. We had to go and use the hotel's laundry machine, which like was still being used by all the amas and all the people working there, like all the older people who like the cleaning ladies and stuff. Whoa, this is cool. There's a bunch of dragons and lions in the glass case with neon lights. I have no idea why. Very weird. But, you know, the university itself was really beautiful. There was two campuses. There was the new campus and the old campus. And the old campus was stunning. This university opened in like in like 1912 or something like that. And so they had a lot of like old buildings and really interesting little areas that you could check out. And I like the area a lot, but it was so, like, just the poverty there was just, like, you almost couldn't believe it, right? Because they had the Beijing Olympics in 2008. And that was the time when people were coming out with stories of, like, China's finally pulled itself out of poverty and China's finally climbing the economic ladder and people have more money and people are able to afford homes and people are actually driving cars in China, like it's crazy. Because not that long ago, you know, Chinese people didn't even have enough food to eat. They were eating things like tree bark and grass and each other in some stories just to survive. I mean, this is like a level of poverty that's just, one, it's a direct result of failed government policy, and two, it's just like completely unprecedented. It's like the saddest thing ever. And there are still remnants of that in Henan, and I remember seeing it and being like I had just moved from Canada where I grew up, and it was like, the difference was so huge. I think it had a rather big effect on me because I think it was like, I don't want to call it pity, but I could definitely, you know, a lot of my friends' families, some of them ended up being really, really wealthy and were actually okay, but a lot of them, you know, their families came from absolutely nothing. I remember we were going to go to, it wasn't Luoyang, although I did really like Luoyang. There was another city, but this one was east of Kaifeng, Shanqiu or something. I don't remember what it was called. But I remember I was visiting, I think, a student of mine's family there, because I was a university teacher there, and so my students were like, you know, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, like the same age as me, basically, which was a really weird dynamic. But we were in this city visiting her family's home, and I remember we went into the countryside, and there was like these series of hills. They weren't quite mountains, but they were like elevated hills that poked up out of the ground that were kind of brownish in color and not very tall. I would say the tallest one would be like, oh man, you guys can't see that, but this building does not, I know, sorry, it's difficult to see. I'm in like a darker area. But not very tall, like that tall, maybe. Hills like that. And these hills were all over the place, and in these hills were like caves in them. I don't know if these caves were natural or handmade or not, but anyways, I remember the locals telling me that's where people lived. People lived in these caves because they didn't have anywhere else to live. They couldn't afford to buy a home, or renting pretty much wasn't a thing back then. Like, they didn't have high-rise skyscraping apartments like they do today. And so people lived in caves. Like, this is not poverty like you live in a hut. We're talking like cavemen, like Stone Age levels of shelter. Like, just stuff you couldn't even imagine seeing today. Of course, when I went there and visited it, that's a mouthful, nobody lived in these caves, of course. But they did talk about how before, lots of people did live there. And it was interesting. Henan was a very interesting place. I said this in my last live stream, but it's so difficult filming in public. It's so cringy, it's so awkward. I can't stand it. I look like such a douchebag. But I gotta get over it. It's my job. But anyways, I lived in Hunan for a year. I lived in Kaifeng for most of it. I lived in Zhengzhou for a little bit. I met good friends over there, you know? Friends I still talk to today. My students were really great. I met a lot of foreign friends. I had some Chinese friends up there. The bars were kind of interesting. It changed a lot. I went back to visit Hunan actually, because after 1 year in Hunan, I moved to Guangdong province. I lived there for 3 years. And I went back to Hunan to visit some old students and some friends and things, and it changed a lot. And but yeah, it was interesting. Guangdong was a big change because Guangdong, which was the most populated province in all of China, was also one of the richest. Unlike Hunan, there are a lot of big cities there. Shenzhen is there, Guangzhou is there, and a few others. So it was a big change for me. It was a lot more wealth there, a lot more money there. The salaries were higher. It was interesting. It was very different too. The language was different, the food was different. This is Ritz-Hao that me and my friends like to go to. I can't remember what it's called, number 9 Harbor or something like that. It's really good. And across the street, you guys can barely see it. You're not gonna be able to read it, but that's the food material hall where you can get different imported goods and foreign ingredients and stuff like puff pastries and different sauces and all kinds of stuff that you won't be able to find at a regular grocery store. Definitely we wouldn't find it at a market. I haven't been in there before, but a lot of my old coworkers went there and they would get me stuff. Interesting. So yeah, Guangdong, big change for me. A lot more money, a lot more going on. But then of course, you know, at the end of the day, after I was there for 4 years, and after 4 years, you get really tired of living in that kind of atmosphere because, now I don't know exactly how to describe this. I've tried, but the way I felt when I was living in China was like, you know, in like those Western movies where they're filming like the sets that they build would be like this old Western town, like a cowboy town, and the buildings aren't actually buildings, it's just one wall, right? Like it's a facade, and then, you know, the wall would just like plop over or whatever. That's kind of what China felt like. Like it felt like the whole place was gonna come apart at any second, like the walls would come down, and it just didn't feel like a real place. It didn't feel like an authentic, it didn't feel like a genuine place. I don't really know how to describe it. The sad thing is, I often hear, I don't know if it's exactly the same thing or if this is exactly how they're trying to describe it, but I often hear Taiwanese people describe Taiwan in the same way, in that Taiwan is like, I want to be very careful with my words here because I don't want to misrepresent Taiwanese people, and I want you guys to understand that this is anecdotal and these are just a handful of people that I've spoken to. This isn't a study. This wasn't like, you know, a handout where people could fill it out and give it back to me. It wasn't that. This is just anecdotal stories. I hear Taiwanese people talk about Taiwan in the same way because Taiwan is such a new country and it hasn't had enough time in the oven, so to speak, to develop a culture of its own. And it suffers from, I shouldn't say it suffers, but it has, look at it, it's Sir Topham Haddam from Thomas the Steam Engine, whatever that was called. Used to love that show when I was a kid. But Canada has the same issue. Like some of the things, like if you were to define a Canadian or one of the things that a Canadian could say, it's like, well, we're not American, you know, we're Canadian. And it's like, okay, fine, but what are you, right? You can't describe a culture or a country based on what it isn't. And Taiwan has the exact same issue. It's like, well, we're not Chinese. It's like, fair enough. What are you then, you know? What defining cultural characteristics do you have that are distinctly Taiwanese? And I'm sure some of you smart cookies in the comments section can definitely point some of these things out. And some people have. For example, Koo from Koo's Dream, the French YouTuber, he's very popular here in Taiwan, and one of the things I really respect about him is that his videos, there aren't like serious topics most of the time. They're very fun. But what's interesting about them is that they really strike at the heart of Taiwanese culture. And so he'll do things like he'll travel around Taiwan and try the best lu rou fan or the best beef noodle soup. Or one that he did that I really liked was he tried the best biendang, which is like bento boxes, like Japanese lunch boxes. Like, I don't know how to describe them if you've never seen them before. They're basically, it's like a box, and inside you get some rice and some meat and some veg, which is a very basic lunchbox type of thing. And he went around the island and tried all the best ones from all of the different train stations or something like that. And it was cool because I find as a YouTuber, it is difficult to find cultural topics to touch on or go and explore because they're not always obvious or they just don't exist. And I think that Taiwanese people kind of lose a bit of confidence or don't have anything to take from and be proud of. And so, but what I like about Koo's channel is that he seems to somehow thread that needle and find those cultural things and make videos about them. And I find that interesting because I struggle to do that sometimes. You know, back in China, it was easy. Everybody cares about China. Everyone's eyes are on China. Everybody wants to try different Chinese food and know about their culture and know about their history. But Taiwan, it's a different story. The only thing that people know about Taiwan is in relation to China. And that's too bad because I do think that Taiwan does have some cultural things worth exploring. It's just not always easy to find those things, and it's not always easy to generate interest in those things because, like we mentioned in Alan's video, if you watched it last week or something, it was a very good video that he made. Taiwan doesn't really have any cultural exports that are getting the general public's interests. We made the comparison to Korea. I don't know why I find that creepy. There's like a garden gnome behind me with like a 1980s Apple logo on her head. But we compared it to Korea. Like, Korea in the last 10 to 15 years has done a very good job at pumping out crazy cultural exports with things like Korean dramas and makeup and K-pop music and movies and tourism and all of that. They've done, you know, they've been able to generate a lot of interest in Korea. And so, you know, 10, 15 years ago, nobody knew anything about Korea. But these days, everybody knows everything about them. And I think that if Taiwan could emulate that in some way, maybe they can find some success too, because it works for Taiwan because it solves a lot of their issues. If you look at the way that, you know, if you look at some of their major issues like they're having with China, what they really need is foreign intervention. And it might be difficult to get foreign intervention if the general public doesn't really know anything about Taiwan. The only thing they know is that it's not China. Well, fair enough, but if you want people to really care about Taiwan, maybe you could produce some cultural exports so that people can consume them and start to care about Taiwan in a different way. But of course, that's not always possible because the Chinese government often suppresses those cultural exports that never see the light of the day, which is unfortunate, but that's just the way it is. And of course, you also have a byproduct of them speaking the exact same language. So I would say most, honestly, it's probably not true, but I'd be willing to put some money on the fact that most Mando pop singers, so singers that sing in Mandarin Chinese, are actually Taiwanese. So even though these people are incredibly famous in China, they're actually Taiwanese. Now, they can't bring up the fact that they're Taiwanese or talk about that whole political situation at all, because they would lose tons and tons and tons of fans and tons and tons and tons of money, obviously. So they wouldn't touch that political issue at all. And so even though Taiwan does produce a lot of music and a lot of pop stars, they can't actually promote it to the rest of the world because the biggest consumer of these things is China. So, anyways, I think I'm getting off topic a little bit. This live stream is shockingly unpopular, but that's okay. I don't care if they're popular or not. I just like to chat with you guys a little bit more on a more immediate level. And now that I've kind of finished that whole spew about Dr. Gao and the whole AIDS epidemic of Henan province, like I said at the beginning of the video, I'd like your guys' advice on how you think it should be shot. Like I mentioned earlier, I am going to make this a full video, which I'm now worried about it. Like if this live stream is this unpopular, then a full video about the topic, edited and produced and all of that, is probably also going to be pretty unpopular. But who knows, maybe it will be if I can get the thumbnail and the title right. So if you guys have any suggestions, that would be great. Like I said, I'm thinking about making it a moto vlog where I can just sit on my motorcycle and chat about it, and that would be easiest. I know you guys like the moto vlogs, and I like them too, and they are a lot easier because it's just one shot, it's just one camera pointed at my face, and then all I have to do is maybe put some music on and some B-roll, and then Bob's your uncle and some subtitles, and the video is done. But that almost feels too easy, and I feel like this topic is one that deserves higher production. I'm just not entirely sure how I'm going to go about doing that. So if you guys have advice, I'd love to hear it. I'll probably have a chat with Alan about it. He's quite good at that type of thing, but we'll see. Let's see what you guys say about it. I haven't seen a Prozzy live in forever. Yeah, it's been a long time. Whoa. There's a high-powered RC car back there. Cool. I thought it was a power tool. It's not. This being a live stream, walking around Taiwan, seeing something interesting, I should go over there and film it and ask those guys about it, but I'm too shy, so apologies. Look at the size of this frickin' KTV though. Isn't that enormous? That's like a friggin' Costco-sized KTV. It looks like a fancy one too. There's some pretty nice cars parked out front. So what was I doing? I think I was seeing what you guys thought about how the video should be shot. I'm lucky to get live. I don't know what that's in reference to. Loving the stream, thank you. Moto vlogs, bro. Yeah, I do miss the moto vlogs. I'm delighted to have 85 viewers during premieres or live streams, yeah. 85 watching. For example, Korea has shown, yeah. Anyways, I don't want to waste your guys' time by trying to go back in retrospect. Interviews with the underground of Taiwan. Loving your lives, Will, don't know. I can't read that. Yeah, some of the undergrounds in Taiwan, I don't know what that means. I think, are you referring to some of the people that have moved to Taiwan who have sort of escaped China or whatever? Perhaps I would have to put out a post and ask them if they want to be interviewed. That might not always be easy to find these people, especially because I am also planning on having this video as my next video. So I needed to get it done rather quickly. I just don't know which one would be more interesting, if I sat in front of a camera somewhere. Doshin. Thank you, Johnny. I don't know what Doshin means. I am desperately trying to read your comments, but they don't make any sense. Could you talk to Winston's wife about what it was like to be a doctor in China? Will donation, but I'm outside. Okay. Yeah, I guess I could talk to his wife about it, although I don't know how often she's even on Winston's channel, really. Hi from Foshan, Guangdong. Hey, I don't think I've ever been to Foshan. I might have, but if I had, it probably wasn't for a very long time, or I was just driving through. And I had been all over Guangdong province, driving either on my scooter or my motorcycle or in my shitty car. I do miss it sometimes, I will say. What was the name of that shitty car you drove in China with sea milk? That was raw, hilarious. That was a Volkswagen Santana. Get a neti pod to clear out your nasal cavity with salt water. Yeah, I know, I apologize about my nose. It's been acting up a lot lately. But yeah, hey Prosy, would you ever consider doing a trip to Australia? No. Fuck Australia. No, I'm joking. Maybe. I don't really have a reason to go. I think the only Australian friend that I have there is my buddy Dion, who came to visit me and Alan here in Taiwan, and he's Australian, but I don't know. I mean, every single Australian I've met abroad has been an absolute nut job. They just have so much energy and they're so over the top. I just can't handle them. I can't handle them. But I've seen some beautiful parts of it, like in videos and stuff. I guess it'd be kind of interesting to check out. But if I do go, you guys will be the first to know. My lucky 5 was in reference to viewers. 85 would be amazing for me. Yeah, I guess it's all a matter of perspective, right? Like, I used to do live streams quite a bit more often earlier on when I started YouTube. And I used to get like, 400, 500 views or something like that. And people were super chatting me, and it was a great way to talk to a lot of people and make a bit of money. But I've stopped doing that, and now that I'm doing it, the views have since dropped, which makes sense because I'm not working as hard at it. And also I'm doing this at a rather weird time. Most Taiwanese people are in bed, and those two guys sitting on the stairs scared the shit out of me. Most Taiwanese people are in bed, and Western people are just waking up, so it's kind of a weird time. But yeah, hey, if you wanted to, I'd be happy to show you around Queensland. I lived in Canada for a few years. Yeah, oh man, I was gonna go that way. It's a dead end, so I guess we're going this way. Yeah, if I'm in Queensland, I suppose I'll let you know. Okay, the story about how you hit the ante while driving your bike stuck in my brain. You said you had been eating steamed buns every day to save money. I wonder how much was your monthly salary back then? It was not a lot. So he's talking about the story how this was back when I was living in Hunan, actually, which is good because that links to the story I was telling, the main story of this whole live stream. But I was living in Hunan province, and I worked at this university, at Hunan University, but that wasn't like an all year thing, right? Because the students got like winter and summers off, and so there were 2 months where I didn't have work and I just wasn't getting paid. And so I wanted to find a job that would pay me for those 2 months that I wasn't working at the university, and I had found one. Because it was only 2 months, they moved me into a different hotel, which was so annoying. I was so excited to like maybe getting an apartment finally, but no, I just moved to a different hotel. Anyways, one day I was driving from this hotel that I lived in to work, and back in China, they had 2 lanes going the same direction that was separated by a concrete barrier. The middle lane, we actually have this here in Taiwan too, but not on every street. But anyways, the middle lane was for cars and the outside lane was for scooters and bicycles and things like that. 2-wheeled vehicles, I guess. And this really old lady was riding a bicycle on the road, and she was quite old and not really riding, like, she was riding too slow to keep herself upright. And you know when you're trying to go as slow as possible on a bicycle, you have to jerk the wheel from left to right to keep your balance, you know what I mean? And she was kind of doing that and driving down the road, and I don't know how fast I was driving. I don't remember it being particularly all that fast, but it was also kind of my first time riding a motorcycle, so I suppose I was quite new at it. But anyways, she jerked the wheel one way and I didn't see it coming, and I hit her front wheel and I went flying. I crashed, obviously, and landed in front of, not in front, I landed under a BMW, and that really sucked. She just like fell over, like because I was driving like with a forward momentum, I crashed and then skidded on down the road and ended up under a BMW, but she wasn't really moving very fast, so she just kind of toppled over, without moving. And she got up and she was fine, and I went over and I was like, oh geez, I didn't speak any Chinese at the time. I didn't know how to ask if she was okay, and I took my helmet off, and as soon as she saw I was a foreigner, she just hit the floor, you know, oh no, my back, my back, my back, and this and that, and was just totally distraught. And in China, when something like that happens, like an accident or something, anyone shows any level of emotional outbursts, crowds appear out of nowhere. People like to rubberneck up there. And so crowds and crowds of people are surrounding us. It was like so scary for me because I didn't know what was going on. She seemed fine, and then she ended up hitting the ground. Anyways, she ended up suing me, or not suing me, but like they take you to, you know, the police station, and then they decide who's at fault and how much money you have to pay. It's not really like a lawsuit, so to speak. It's just like, I don't know if we have this in the West. It feels weird to me, but like you have to give them money for like emotional damages from the accident. And I'll have to go back and watch that video because I can't remember exactly how much she asked, but it was a lot. It was more than I had. To answer your original question, my monthly salary, does this thing happen in Taiwan as far as lawsuits? Yeah, it does. It does happen in Taiwan. Although I'm not quite sure. Like I've seen countless accidents in Taiwan. And one of the weird things I always see is that when Taiwanese people get hit, like on a scooter, even if they're completely fine, they just lie there motionless, like completely limp. And I don't know if they do that, like, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt and hope that it's not because of like insurance scam or scamming the person that hit them. I think it's something like when the police come to do the reports, they want to know exactly where you've fallen over and then like that sort of thing. So I think that's why they do it, but it's really weird. Like they just lie there like, you know. But in China, this lady was definitely after my money. And to answer your original question, my salary at this university was only 7,000 RMB a month. I don't know what that is in USD or anything like that. I don't have, I'm using my phone to film this, so I don't know how to do the conversion, but it wasn't a lot of money. The reason it wasn't a lot of money because my hours were very low. And so I ended up having to pay this lady all of the money I had, and then the school agreed to pay her all of the money that I was going to make because I didn't have enough to pay whatever the police had decided it was. And that was such a crazy time for me. So I had absolutely no money. And then, of course, I'm working for the school and I'm not going to make any money. And so I didn't have any money to eat. And I would like buy these baozi for like, it's like one of the cheapest things you could buy. And I would like split them in half and eat one for the morning and then one in the afternoon. And I remember, this is so sad, but I remember like I was left with this like broken ass janky motorcycle, you know, after the crash. The handlebars were all bent and it was a mess. And I remember like eventually I ran out of money and I couldn't even put fucking gas in the tank, so I was like walking to work. And this part of China got like so cold in the winters, but it was also extremely warm in the summers too, so like walking anywhere is just the worst. It was such a rough time, but I'm kind of glad I went through that though, because I think that it's a real test of character, so to speak. Like if you can make it through that much poverty, you know. I didn't want to ask my parents for money or friends for loans or anything like that. I think it was just a sense of pride. And I was so young, like I was in my early 20s, I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. I was like, yeah, I can be poor, whatever. I put myself through college, I could do this. And through that, I ended up meeting some really interesting people. I remember there was this university bar we used to go to. I think it was called Coco, or I don't remember what it was called, but there was these people that would go. I don't know. Anyways, there was this older lady. She was incredibly good looking, and she kind of took care of me through my time there. It was interesting, but yeah, fun story. Oh man, I touched the microphone. I have a funny feeling that microphone's not going to work anymore. You guys can let me know. I hate how finicky it is. That's so incredibly annoying. It's a common saying in Taiwan to not move anything at all in an accident. And yeah, that makes sense. Like I know that if your scooter falls over or your motorcycle falls over, you shouldn't move it. But you yourself, sounds fine. Okay, thanks. But you yourself, like you sack of meat, are just strewn out onto the road. Like you're just lying there motionless. and other cars are driving by and trucks and things, and they might not see you, and now you're putting yourself in even more danger. And that's just like, to me, sounds kind of dumb and kind of dangerous. Like, get up off the road and move your ass over. And the ambulance, you can tell the police later. I mean, there's cameras all over the place. It's not like this place doesn't have, you know, surveillance all over the place. Like, even just look right here. Up on this post, cameras. They are everywhere in Taiwan. Prazi had a sugar mama. Yeah, I sure did. She was great. She would take me to like these really fancy bars and like really swank clubs and like these weird places I absolutely did not belong in. I remember we went to this one place. It was so weird. It was so weird. It was like in this part of Kaifeng, because Kaifeng where I lived used to be the capital of all of China in the Song Dynasty, in the Song Dai. And so you would think that this place would be like this enormous city with lots of, you know, artifacts and history, and it just really isn't. It's kind of a shithole. But lately they've been trying to bring it back. So they've been doing up buildings around the city to look like Song Dynasty buildings, and they're trying to get back their lost history. And one of these places, did YouTube really put a COVID notification over this fucking video? It's so annoying. Like, how is that still a thing? But anyways, we're in this bar in one of these little neighborhoods that they turn into like this kind of historical looking buildings. And it was like this weird bar where you would, you could like drink, and they sold cigars and stuff. And they had these like girls that were dressed in like sexy lingerie that had like spikes all over them. It was so weird. And I remember I smoked a cigar too much and ended up like running over to the balcony and just barfing out onto the streets below. It was awful. But yeah, crazy time. I am also planning on making more videos about China. There's a very good reason I've avoided the topic for so long, and I'll make a video about that as well. But it seems to me like, I think if I'm gonna get people interested in Taiwan, I have to talk about China, even though I don't want to. I feel like I have to, because it's the only way that I think I'll get people kind of in the door. So I'll be doing that more. The reason I came this weird way, by the way, is to make sure that my motorcycle is still okay, and it is. I parked in this really weird spot, and I was worried that these cars that park here would back up and hit me, so I parked kind of far away. But it looks to be okay to me, so that's good. I just exited and came back. I didn't get anything COVID. Okay, that's good. What are your plans on going forward? Are you planning to stay in Taiwan for that foreseeable future? Yeah. I have no real reason to leave. I mean, I like living here. It's pretty nice. It's not, like I said hello to you. You know, it's just not a bad place to live. I wouldn't call it exciting, but I enjoy it. And so, you know, I thought about doing YouTube in other countries. Like, it'd be cool to go to Japan or Korea or something like that, but those countries are so saturated with YouTubers now. I don't know what I have to offer that's any different than what they do, you know? I mean, shit, I have to compete in this market, and that's already difficult. But I'm doing my best. Talk about China for clicks. Where have I heard that before? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Are you saying that because you have an issue with it? Like, it's a popular topic, and part of the ways I make money is by getting clicks. So I'm gonna go after topics that people actually want to learn about. So I don't know, if that upsets you, then you don't have to watch the video. But anyways, it'd be nice to hear what other countries like Japan think of Taiwan. Yeah, that would be really interesting. I went to the Philippines like, I don't know how many months ago, and I shot a video and asked them, look at his name, Prazi, lol, 86 lol, yeah, copying my old buddy C-Milk's channel there. But I remember I asked Filipinos what they thought of Taiwan, and that was kind of a fun video. So it'd be interesting to do that in other countries, but the issue with Japan, I'm sure I could solve this issue quite easily, but generally speaking, the people there don't speak English. Their English level is quite a bit lower than like Taiwan's language level is. And for sure the Philippines, right? Everybody speaks English in the Philippines, so it was so easy to find people to talk to. And everyone there is so open and friendly, it was so easy to find people. You know, in Japan, I think that people are quite a bit more shy, but I don't know, I'm sure I could solve that issue, so yeah. Anyways, I'm coming close to my home, so I'm gonna end this live stream. Thank you guys so much for watching. Again, put your suggestions in the comments. Appreciate you guys. I'll see you guys next week for another live stream, because like I said, I plan on doing this a lot more